your stopper ball, for instance, and things like that, you can introduce them in a safe way into the isolator if it's possible, and then how, after closing the isolator, you will decontaminate them. And this is really a challenge at the moment, and you will need to make a robust risk assessment regarding this point. Personnel, only the minimum number of personnel required should be present in the clean room. But the maximum number of operators in clean room should be determined, documented, and considered during activities such as initial qualification and aseptic process simulation, not to compromise the sterility assurance. So, what is validated during the validation, during the first validation work, and during the requalification work, and during the aseptic process simulation? This is really important that you consider and you design your aseptic process simulation incorporating all adverse event, all critical things you will have to do during this operation. Like that, you will the process will be covered by the worst case of this aseptic process simulation. Now, there is an important point. Personnel accessing grade A and B areas should be trained for aseptic gunning and aseptic behaviors. Compliance with aseptic gunning should be confirmed by assessment and periodic reassessment, at least annually. So, if you uh, in in some training operation, you can do that out of grade A and B areas to train and retrain your staff. Some companies has built mock airlocks where they can check how people are gunning and wearing their gunning and their suit. For the monitoring of the staff, you will have to do it during the production operation. The access to the critical areas need to be made to be allowed only to trained and qualified personnel. And when we talk about qualified personnel, that means that we have assessed the gunning processes, we have assessed the aseptic behavior, um, and these are, and they will have as well, to be qualified, they will have as well to go through um, aseptic process simulation. For the first one, they will have to do 3 aseptic process simulation to be qualified. Now we have talked about qualification, and regulators ask that industry people, industry companies think to have as well a system in place for disqualification of personnel from working from working in these critical areas, which are grade A and B areas. That means that if people have been involved in a failed APS, if looking at the trends, you consider that one team, one shift has more non-compliance than the others, you have to assess this team, check why they have lower uh, results, and for that you can disqualify one or two members of the team. Once they have disqualified, they will need to be trained again, and they have to pass through a new aseptic process simulation before being allowed going again into the production area. This is really critical. So here I will not cover this. You know this. This is the description of the gowning for grade A and B areas. In some companies are using subcontractors to take care of their gowning. So these companies will clean, pack, sterilize, and deliver the gowning to the facility. That means that you need to have the perfect knowledge of the process which has been subcontracted. That means that you need to train and to check how they are working, how they are inspecting the suits to avoid having damage going into the grade A areas. So the gowning has to be visually inspected for damage and visual cleanliness. But in many companies as well, they have their own laundry, and the laundry has to be segregated from the production operation, but it can be connected to the production area to avoid kind of transportation or things like that. That means as well that you will have to do what you should require to your subcontractors. The process needs to be qualified. Be sure that the clothing are not damaged and are not contaminated by fibers, and you do not have risk of introduce the risk of contamination, cross contamination. And now we are coming to the production part of this training, of this presentation. Sorry. So we need to have a full understanding of our processes. Quality risk management is based on process knowledge. Contamination control strategy is based on process knowledge. So the development of the product is really critical at the very beginning. So we need a process which is clearly defined. We need to identify and to know the risk associated with the aseptic process and any associated requirement which should be identified, assessed, and appropriately controlled. And this is incorporated into the site contamination control strategy. And the residual risk should be formally documented. That means that when you will do an aseptic process simulation, you will have to document it in a proper way. You will need to make good protocols based on your processes to assess all the risk you have identified. Your aseptic process simulation will have to cover all the remaining risk you have identified and or you have identified and accepted. As it is for sterile product and aseptic production, we need to minimize microbial, endotoxin, pyrogenic, and particle contamination precautions. Again, for equipment, they said, where possible, use equipment such as wraps, isolator, or other system. But existing filling line, you will be able to manage them. For sure, you will have to discuss with your regulatory authorities to be sure that you are compliant. That means that based on risk assessment, you will have to maybe increase your monitoring processes. What is allowed to do into grade A area? It's aseptic assembly of filling equipment, connection made under aseptic conditions, aseptic compounding and mixing, replenishment of sterile byproduct containers closures, removal and cooling of unprotected items from sterilizers, staging and conveying of sterile primary packaging components in the aseptic filling line while not wrapped. That means that's why as well I have recommended to have around the machine which is under grade A, you should have grade A air supply. Like that, you will not bring contamination. Grade B is the background support for grade A. Loading of lyophilizers is as well required for as a grade A operation. Now, considering the unloading, if you make some lyophilization into open ampoules, the unloading of the ampoules will be required to be made in grade A condition. If you have vials where the stopper has been closed in the freeze dryer,